Hi, this is Mo Volans for Tuts Plus, and we're looking at two tutorials back to back here, both on mastering. One of them's on MS processing, and this one is on multi-band treatments. So you're probably going to see them published at around the same time, so hopefully you'll be able to follow both of them. Now, both of these treatments, MS processing and multi-band processing, are probably seen as special treatments and are perhaps something that aren't used so much in a DIY mastering chain. A DIY masterer will probably go with a bus compressor, an EQ and a limiter, and that might be about it. They might go ahead and make some mistakes and, throw things like stereo enhancers across the entire mix. But when it comes to multiband compression or dynamic EQ, whatever you want to call it, and MS processing, these things are probably a little bit misunderstood and may be used incorrectly. I'm going to show you how I use them. I tend to go subtle all the way with both of these treatments and just keep things on the lowdown and just don't put too much treatment in there. So let's take a look at a multiband compressor. Obviously, there's a lot of these. Logic has got one included in it. Cubase has got one included in it. Waves do great multiband compressors. FabFilter do an awesome one. This is really a more traditional multiband compressor. I think it's quite clear. And more importantly, it fits in my 720 window that we're working in. So let's take a look at this. It's from Universal Audio. It's been around for a while. You can see that the bands are nicely colored so that it's color coded, so we know exactly what we're working with. And by the way, a multi-band compressor works by taking the entire frequency range, 20 to 20, and splitting it into bands. In this case, 5 bands. Some multi-band compressors will have a custom amount of bands. Some will have a preset number like this. But essentially, they work by using a crossover at each point, like a filter crossover, and cutting it into different bands. So you can see we can alter these bands. So we could have anything from 100 Hertz down to 20 Hertz, and anything from 5 kilohertz up to 20 kilohertz, etc. And by making one of the bands bigger, you're making another band smaller, so be aware of that. And we can obviously turn these off as well, so you can hear them in action. And also we can solo them down here, which we're going to see in a second. But what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how we can tame frequencies first of all, and then how we can boost frequencies without hyping things too much. So I'm going to show you sort of two techniques. I'm going to show you how to sort of tame high end and tame low end if you need to. And then we're going to look at the same sort of treatments, but in a boosting sort of additive fashion. Okay, so let's have a listen to the mix. This is the same track we were working with in the last tutorial. Now, just to show you, if I load up a preset, we can do some pretty intense stuff. And this just gives you an idea of what it's going to look like when things are firing off. And there's the mix out, and there's the mix in. I'm just going to take that back to default. So that's completely flat right now. So let's say we wanted to tame the high end. First thing to do is solo that high end. And you can hear that's really the very top end of the mix. It's what I call the air. And we can adjust that by grabbing this crossover point and taking the very, very high end, or anything down to about 5 kilohertz. I'm going to go with around 6K. And then we can start to add some compression. Now, this is a compressor that's sort of repeated on each band. It's exactly the same. I'm going to keep it in compress mode. We can have compress, expand, or gate. In this tutorial, we'll be sticking with compression. And I'm just going to bring the threshold down until we start to see some gain reduction. There. And we're getting 6, 7, 8, 9 decibels of gain reduction. So that's quite a bit. And to reduce that, we're going to bring the ratio down. And there we've tamed the high end. Now, it's just going to sound dull, to be honest with you, because the high end didn't really need taming in this mix. But if you wanted a warmer, more analog sound, You could round things off and make things a bit more organic, you know, if you wanted to remove some of that crystalline high end. It depends how warm you want things to be, or dull. But if you did have a hyped high end, this would be if you couldn't go back to the mix, this would be a great way of controlling it. We can turn that band off. Let's say we wanted to control the low end, and the low end's going to be moving obviously a lot more slowly, just because of the nature of low end energy. And same process, and reduce the ratio a little, and you can change the attack and release. Try and time it a little, make it a little bit more transparent. Bring that ratio down until you've got, you know, 2, 3, 4 dB of reduction. Let's have a listen to that band. You can hear those subsonics there. If we bring it up to where the kick is, you can really tame that low end. But the good thing here is that if you've got some subsonics, or you've got a bass guitar or a kick drum that's too loud, you can home in on it. So, you know, you don't necessarily have to use these top and bottom bands in this fashion. Let's say we wanted to home in on the kick drum. Say 100, well, 90 hertz to say 100. Let's make sure it's playing. There we go, that sounds pretty good. Now we can do the same thing, and you should start to see the kick drum being reduced. And that won't affect the rest of the mix at all. So we're taming the kick drum there. Almost remove it, whilst leaving the rest of the mix completely intact. And that really is the beauty of multiband processing right there. If you've got a problem element in your mix, or you've got an element that's too loud or too quiet, you can attack it without affecting the rest of the mix at all. So these special treatments, as we looked at MS processing and we're looking at this, are really surgical. You know, we're really homing in on a specific part of the mix. Okay, so let's look at a slightly different technique, and that's just straight up compression. And this is sort of more dynamic EQ. Let's say we want to add some high mids, but we want to add the high mids, but we don't want to hype the mix. So you can change the gain of a band, and that just sounds like digital EQ, really. Let's open it up a little. I don't want too much of that 1K there. Okay, let's say this is the area we want to enhance. So a trick that you can use is to add as much as you want, but maybe go a little further and then add compression. So it sort of tames it. You've got subtraction and additive styles at the same time. So you're ensuring that that EQ stays in control. Things don't get too hyped. So that's without. And that's with. And it doesn't sound hyped. We can do a little bit of that with the high end as well. And let's go to town and do a little bit with the low end. So that's without. And that's with. Without. And with. So we've got a subtle effect, but we're not hyping the mix. It may look pretty extreme, but because we've got this downward compression with the upward additive EQ, the two don't cancel each other out, but it just makes it behave. You've got that compression, you're keeping things in line in that frequency area, but at the same time you are adding gain. So you get this, nice tight EQ effect. And I find often that's a better way of EQing masters than just using a straight EQ. It's really dynamic EQ. So there you go. There's two different ways of approaching multiband processing in your mastering chain. Hopefully that shed a little bit of light on it for you, and load up your own multiband processor, and hopefully it should make a bit more sense. Essentially, it's just 4 or 5 compressors with different frequency responses per compressor. That's really all it is. It shouldn't be intimidating, even for the beginner. As always, leave comments, leave suggestions. I'm open to suggestions for future tutorials, so just let me know what you want to see.